take a seat. Thank you for taking a seat. We're starting the second panel now. So we're starting with the second panel now. Thanks for taking a seat. So I'm very pleased to welcome you for the second panel, Climate Action and Energy Transition in War Times and Emergency Situations. Thank you for all taking a seat. May I ask you to take a seat, please? We're planning to start the panel right now, yeah? Okay. Okay. Thank you for taking a seat. We're starting the panel, okay? Thank you. Okay. So everybody's sitting down. Yes. Yeah, can you turn it up a bit? Okay. So I hope I can be heard correctly. Good. So I'm very happy to welcome you to the second part of the panel, a very distinguished panel on climate action and energy transition in war times and emergency situations in the context of German and Ukrainian energy partnerships and cooperation. But now we're very happy to bring some interesting examples from all around the globe to this discussion. We heard a lot about what it means to be resilient in the energy sector in times of war. The example from Ukraine, all the challenges, the pathway to become carbon neutral on the way to joining the European Union. And now we have some very interesting examples from other countries that we can learn from, and we'll focus a bit more on energy, on emergency. So war and emergency challenges for the energy system. My name is Katja Kammerer. I work with GIZ. I'm director for commissioning parties, and I'm very pleased to be with you today to moderate this panel. Let us welcome our distinguished guests here on this panel. So to my left, I'm very happy to welcome Anna Ackermann. Yeah, she brings in the view from civil society, and she is a policy and analyst on green reconstruction of Ukraine with the International Institute for Sustainable Development, IISD. Then next to Anna is Juan Carlos, and I have to see that I pronounce your name correctly, Juan Carlos Olmeda, correct? He is the president of the board of Coordinador Nacional Eléctrico from Chile. So he will bring in the perspective from South America and from a grid operator. So that's correct, great. Then I'm very happy to welcome Mr. Adomas Audicas, who is the head of biomethane business MHP in Ukraine. So he also works as an advisor to the Prime Minister of Ukraine, if I'm informed correctly. And so you will bring in the perspective of Ukraine, again, biomethane, but also decentralized grid management and supply to municipalities, right? That's very good. And additionally, we're very happy to welcome Mrs. Christina Haferkamp, who is the managing director of the German Energy Agency, DENA, also very distinguished and important partner in this endeavor. And we have to your left our distinguished guest from Uganda. He is Mr. Brian Isabiria. He's the commissioner at the Ministry of Energy and Mineral Development of Uganda. Welcome to this panel. Welcome to all of you. We're very happy to be able to continue this discussion that we had on the first panel and to broaden the view a little bit to see what can international examples of emergency situations and the impact on resilience in the energy system teach us. How can we transfer also the experience from Ukraine, put this together and see what we can learn from that. So let me start with you, actually, Mr. Juan Carlos Olmeda, on the perspective from Chile. So Chile is an earthquake-prone country. So I imagine that emergencies are your daily business. And so we're very interested in hearing what are the policy and technical measures that have been effective in Chile in advancing green transition and renewable energy goals from your perspective. And what are the obstacles? If you could tell us a little bit about the obstacles that your country faces in accelerating also the transition to a low carbon economy. I think this is the great challenge, while also maintaining commitment to ambitious climate policies. Please, Mr. Almeida.
Thank you. Well, talking about what has been the successful measure that the country has implemented. First of all, within 2005 up 2007, there was new laws, one regarding to promote renewable energy, and the other one was to modify the rules to supply distribution companies, giving some space for renewables to supply distribution companies. And that means a fast deployment of renewable energy. Some figures, by 2019, 40% of the energy generated in the country comes from variable renewable energy resources. But by 2023, we're reaching 34% of variable renewable energy resources, supplying the electricity, more than the double in only 4 years. And also there are some regulations to promote distributed energy resources, and has been very fast growing. Today we have roughly 2,500 megawatts of distributed energy resources that represent 25% of daylight supply of the demand. And we expect by the end of the next year, we'll reach 4,000 megawatts. And that will represent 40% of the total demand. And as you have mentioned, we have some challenge regarding the events of nature. We have developed a very strict regulation regarding earthquakes, but there are new challenges regarding the climate change, like high temperatures, dry years, and that means since 3 years ago, forest wildfires are a great challenge because are burning the vast surface of the country, and it's a challenge for transmission line operation. Also, floods and high temperature that reduce the capacity of transmission lines. Then we're working on deploying DLR to manage the capacity of transmission line in a dynamic way. Also, as I mentioned, the high volume of distributed energy resources creates the needs to monitor, because it represents a high percentage, and manage. We don't have an observability of those resources today. Also, to be more effective, we need to modify or modernize our distribution and sector regulation in order to manage those distributed energy resources and also deploy storage.
Yeah, thank you so much for this interesting perspective from a country that is challenged by emergency situations. So let's see what we can learn from that. So I would like to turn back to Ukraine and maybe to bring in the view of civil society here. So Anna Ackermann, if I would ask you how what your take is on the war in Ukraine and how this influenced the prioritization of renewable energy and decentralization within the country's energy and climate policies. We would be very interested because, decentralized also means maybe more resilient in times of war and emergency.
Thank you so much for, first of all, for the invitation. And I feel like I should not only be talking about what civil society is doing, but also for our cities, because we have not discussed this today, although there will be in the next panels also here. I also represent, except for IASD, as an analyst, I also represent Ukraine's largest environmental NGO as a board member, EcoAction. And we work a lot with other NGOs in Ukraine who promote decentralized energy in Ukraine. I would like to give you a short overview of actually what we had before the 24th of February last year, before the Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, to give you a sense how what kind of challenges were there, but also important developments. So since 2014, well, let's say in 2013-14, we had almost zero small-scale PV installations on rooftops of private households. But then with the feed-in tariff, that was very favorable. By the end of 21, we had already 15,000 rooftop solar PV installations. When it comes to solar on municipalities, we didn't have that many projects because financially it was not that interesting to install. But privately speaking, so small households were developing this, and also medium-sized businesses. And large size, of course, you can see some of the examples here also what we have today. So this is the situation we had because we had a feed-in tariff system. Also in 2021, Ukraine submitted its nationally determined contribution to Paris Agreement back in just before the Glasgow. That for the first time was actually quite ambitious, and that said that our economy would be growing, but we would like to at least stabilize the emissions or even decrease them by 2030. And most of the reductions were supposed to be coming from the energy sector and energy efficiency in the building sector. Energy sector played a big part because of so much coal in our quarter of electricity is produced from coal. So we hope to reduce that. And also one more point, what we already had before, and in the previous panel, this was already mentioned, the work on just transition in coal regions also that started. And in fact, through German support, BMZ, the Ministry of Economic Development Cooperation, back in 2017, NGOs were the first ones who actually started to work with coal mining cities in Ukraine on their just transition away from coal. And already back then, our cities understood how important it was to diversify their economies, and they clearly saw that coal had no future. So there was a lot of work that was already done before. So what happened when Russian full-scale invasion started? One very important point, and I think it was historic, is that Ukraine connected its electricity grid to the old European grid, so ENTSO-E. And from the very first day, I think there was many players who just started doing everything so that happened, so that our electricity system would keep on going, because it was a question of security. But also, there was one interesting moment in March when the fights for the northern regions of Ukraine were still ongoing. An owner of a solar PV rooftop installation, one of those who installed them back 9 years ago, during the absence of electricity in the grid, shared his very precious renewable produced electricity with his neighbors. And then he went to the army, and unfortunately, he's not there with us anymore because he died in Bakhmut. His name is Oleksiy Khabatyuk. He's one of the best energy and climate experts that Ukraine ever had. And he was the person who contributed a lot to democratize our energy system as such, to have all of those decentralized energy production. So we owe a lot to him. And what's been happening since? Well, when Russia started shelling our energy system, our critical infrastructure, back in November 22, we started importing hundreds of thousands of diesel generators in Ukraine to keep on running. This was very crucial for the survival of the people, to have critical infrastructure running on them. But at some points, electricity from this diesel generators for producing electricity 24/7, it was worth 8 to 10 times more than electricity from the grid. It was so expensive. So many municipalities understood that they wanted more sustainable solutions. And they were asking civil society to also help. And we also were, of course, searching for ways to help them. So we started having some first pilot projects on decentralized energy production. One of them being in Hostomel community in Kiev region, to basically have a showcase of how renewables on critical infrastructure and hospitals can work. So just with NGO support, we have a renewable, the solar rooftop installation plus storage plus a heat pump. And that appeared to be, the system started running in January this year, and it is just enough to cover all of the basic needs of this hospital. Municipalities started asking for more because they saw it's possible. The demand started increasing, so we have hundreds of municipalities who want to have this sort of systems. What there is not enough for now is, of course, the resources. This is why this support that was announced today is crucial, because municipalities really, some of them are ready to co-finance even, but they need this long money, preferably in hryvnia, as they say, but they really want to have this possibility to finance this sort of installations. And I will wrap up with this. Sorry for taking it long, but when I'm looking around, the Ukraine Pavilion is the second one now that Ukraine has at COP, and I really hope that the next pavilion will have these examples of our cities, with their renewable green energy projects already, not just the big scale, which is important, but also the small scale, because they bring this resilience that we really need.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Yeah, I think this was very, very focused plaidoyer also for decentralized energy supply and some great local examples how things can work. And I think that's a good a bridge to turn to you, Mr. Audiakas, for the maybe your view on and your experience with distributed generation on the municipal level, but also in general, on a more aggregated level, the country's decentralized energy resilience in the midst of the war. Over to you. I have to turn it on.
Can you hear me now? Yes. Thank you very much. I'm representing a corporate entity business. We are the biggest poultry producer in Europe. And for us, constant electricity supply is a must. If we don't have a constant supply, then our harvest, our animals, they're going to die. So it's very, very important to have constant supply. And what we are working right now is to have an independent system, an island basically, where we'll produce power and heat on our own. I would like to be more optimistic, but unfortunately, in the short term, you cannot do much. The only thing you can do is just invest in diesel generators, and we invested heavily, but this is only short-time solution. For the longer term, we're planning the same as in traditional power system. You have renewables, then you have base load, which is in fossil fuels is either nuclear or coal, and then you have flexible capacity, which is natural gas. We're planning to have wind and solar, but not too much, because if you have too much of it, then your system becomes unreliable and you create even more problems than you solve. On the base load, we're going to invest in biomass cogeneration. Ukraine is very rich in biomass, and if it would use all biomass, it could fully replace natural gas in Ukraine. And on the flexible capacity, we're going to invest into biomethane, which is green gas. However, once we started analyzing and we made this plan for us, we still realize that fossil fuels, unfortunately, they're still way more competitive, cost competitive, and it's not good. It should not be this way. If you and the problem why it is so is that usually with renewables you have very big capital investments. For example, if you build a natural gas power plant, a cost per installed megawatt capacity is around 1 million euros, and you can do it in 12 months very quickly. If you do it with biomass, then it's at least 3 times of that, and it takes 2 years. And with rising interest rates, this project become very, very uncompetitive compared with fossil fuel options. So again, we're planning in our company to build it, but it is very, very difficult because fossil fuels are way more competitive. And if we would have a support where capital costs compensated percentages, that would make fossil fuels way least competitive and biofuels way more competitive. The other thing is that we don't have carbon tax, and this is the key problem, because if you consider real cost of fossil fuels, a megawatt of power in natural gas is 40 euros, roughly. Green gas, which is biomethane, the cost is 70 euros. So it's more expensive than natural gas. But if you consider carbon that is released when you're burning natural gas, then let's say that if a ton of carbon costs 100 euros, then the cost will be the same of natural gas and green gas. So this is what governments needs to do to make our investment solutions easy. I know that it's very difficult to introduce global carbon tax, but if it's not introduced, then the transition will be very, very slow, because we're a big company, we can afford to do this transition. Smaller companies cannot. The other problem is that it's very, very important, is that green energy usually is local market, while fossil fuels, it's global. There are no regulations, free trade, no problems. I can give you an example where regulations actually serve cross objectives. Regulation should be created so that green energy achieves objectives. We have less CO2, we have more efficiency, but we have regulations sometimes that actually achieve different things. So for example, if we produce biomethane in Ukraine, there are two routes on how we can sell it to Germany. One way is we ship it via gas grid. And this is the cheapest way, very efficient, requires very, very little energy. The other way, we need to liquefy it, to make liquid out of it, then put it into trucks and transport it into Germany. And if we do by second option, then we can participate in German market. But if we do by grid, which is way more efficient, way better for climate, we cannot do that. So sometimes business is actually forced to do not very, very clever things because of regulations that are wrong.
Yeah, thank you so much for this valuable perspective. I think, yeah, the question of regulation is really also a challenging one. Yeah, thanks for passing on the microphone to Christina Haferkamp from Dana. And I think it would be interesting now to hear the German perspective. So from the point of view of Germany, what's the role of decentralized renewable energy while ensuring energy security, resilience, and of course also effective climate action? And what are currently the main challenges faced by Germany in this regard? And what could takeaways be actually for other countries?
Well, first of all, I would like to start by commenting on your criticism regarding regulations and regulatory impediments against the export of biomethane. Yes, you're absolutely right. The problem is that when you ship it as LNG, of course, you have physically biomethane. If you put it into the gas grid, you need to have a certification program, and you need to be sure that those that buy the certificates get the certificates of those that really produce biomethane. And Dana and the Ukraine side are very much working on a solution for this problem by establishing a biomethane registry, and I very much hope that we will be able to finish that in the next couple of weeks, because we see that biomethane is a really potentially a very important economic factor in Ukraine. And we also see that Germany needs biomethane from Ukraine, so it should be made possible. But talking about decentralized electricity production, we have a level of about 46 to 50%, 46 it was last year, share of renewable volatile electricity in the German electricity mix, which is going strong. We have very ambitious targets for 2030. We shall have hopefully 80% in the grid, but the grid is one of the problems, because the grid, of course, is constructed according to our old electricity production system, meaning we have centralized productions close to the industrial centers in Germany, which are basically in the south and in the southwest. But now we have the renewable production, which is in the north. And we have a bit of renewable production all over Germany because wind on land is right now contributes the largest share of renewables to the German system. But PV, in particular rooftop PV, is following fast. So that makes up a very distributed mix. And we see that that's a huge challenge for the transmission grids on the one hand side. They need to be expanded from the north to the south and to the west, but also, and maybe even more, for the distribution grids, which up to now have been pretty stupid ones, just channeling down electricity from the transmission level to the local level. And one of the solutions that we are actually considering is building up more microgrids, because microgrids are more resilient. They have a modular character, so you can stick them together. You can even combine them with the smart grid on the transmission level. Then you have a nationwide system, but you can always take them off the grid and they will be self-sufficient for the time being, at least for a certain amount of time, depending on the storage capacities and also on the base load integrated into the this kind of system. And we see that as very much of a solution also for Ukraine, because you don't have the problems with the transmission, but you have the problem with attacks on your centralized production facilities. And that means the danger of blackouts. And then you have to black start the system, which is extremely challenging. If you distribute microgrids, you will be able to react much more flexible to these kind of attacks, and you will also be more difficult to attack.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mrs. Haferkamp, to this for this valuable view on from the German system and examples. And so, Mr. Echeverria, maybe you as the last speaker here, what is listening to our panelists and adding the Ugandan experience? What is your take on the solutions on decentralized renewable energy?
Thank you very much. I note that there are many similarities now between Uganda and Ukraine. As you note, Uganda is the #1 refugee host in Africa. I think we only next or second to Turkey globally. So we have been dealing with some of these challenges of conflicts for some time. And one of the things that we've noted, and my colleague just spoke to that, is that in the art of war, centralizing your weapons of war is a challenge. Because then you can imagine when the dam was bombed in Ukraine, you have a lot of losses, because then that is the mainstay of the country. So one of the things that we've learned, and which I see coming out across this panel, is that decentralized renewables are a solution to deployment, if you want to deploy very fast, but also when you want to tactically have your power support your different reactions, for example, response to conflicts. And in this case, we are discussing refugees and aspects of decentralization, of destabilization. So our country is 58% access now, and all the 38% is from these DREs. That tells you how important this can be in aspects of ramping up access where you have conflicts. We have achieved that against a number of challenges, and these challenges kept coming up across all the speakers, one of which is the need for us to localize value chains. So if you're going to have quick deployment, you need technology. So you need to have delocalized value chains. But that also comes with the need for capacity, whether human or institutional, is very key. You need to have these if you're going to deploy these very fast. In some contexts, and my colleague spoke about the need for policy and regulatory framework, that is very critical. And of course, the awareness. I think one of the lessons that we've learned in our case as we deploy these solutions is the need for us to manage the financing. You need to have the right mechanism for managing the financing. And my colleague from Chile, and I think Madame over there, talked about the need for having mechanisms in financing that manage the upfront costs. So aspects for consumer support or consumer financing, such as pay-as-you-go, are critical because then people want to pay over a longer period. But for managing private sector and de-risking the market for private sector, then result-based financing becomes an intervention that one should be looking at, because then private sector wants to have markets that are de-risked. So in the case of conflict today, if you wanted private sector to supply these equipment that you need, they want to know that their market is a bit de-risked before they can bring in their private financing. But also the aspect of smart subsidies is critical. In events of conflict, it's always common for us to go in with subsidies that are blanket subsidies. Now that has a challenge because then you can distort the market forever. Wherever you're responding to conflict, you throw in subsidies that now change the mentality of the consumers, but also sometimes the private sector. So they get used to grants. So after bouncing back, then you can't bring back the market that it was. Now, today we heard about an announcement of some financing that will come to Ukraine. Sometimes financing is available in these contexts, but may not be fitting to the private sector that needs it. So you may need to come up with aspects of financial intermediation to make sure that you break down the ticket size to be affordable for private sector. Otherwise, it may be 10 million US dollars and the private sector is looking for 200 or 500. So you need to have some form of intermediation to make sure that you create ticket size that is available, that is affordable for the private sector to take that up. The last one is the need for coordination. DREs and in general renewables are partnership driven. So you need to be able to coordinate the different players. Private sector is critical, and so is government to provide that enabling environment. So you need to make sure that you have coordinated these players, and so are the development partners that provide this financing. So a strong need for developing coordination as we respond, as we plan together, but as we deploy the resources that we need. Thank you.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much. So excellent and very interesting to see that we had examples from so different countries such as Chile, Uganda, and Ukraine, Germany, and found similarities and challenges, and also I think some really good examples how to respond and how to deal with emergency situations, war situations, and the resilience of the energy system. Thank you very much for being with us today for this panel, and I wish you a very good continuation of COP28. Thank you so much. Mm-hmm. But we're finishing.
Just one word.
Just
thank.
Okay.
I thought, I was bringing the conversation, my talk toward one important thing. I mentioned one, first pilot projects of renewables for critical infrastructure in Ukraine. And we started very quickly with other NGOs searching for countries that could help to scale this up. And Germany was the country that helped. I think in a conflict situation, in a war situation, it's really precious when somebody is reacting quickly. So already in March this year, the BMWK, the German Ministry for Economic Affairs and Climate Action, it gave a 2 million euro grant to have more projects of the one that I described to you. And they are called, so the project is called Renewables for Resilient Ukraine. This is the EKI pilot project. And it's important to have these pilots. It's important to show how it works. So just thanks, to the partners who are doing this for us. It's very, really crucial. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. And thanks to all of you for attending this session. Yeah.